Nobody could tame the Mafia boss's Pitbull. Then the waitress did something shocking. "Listen to me, and listen good," the busboy whispered, his hands trembling as he polished a wine glass until it threatened to snap. "That dog isn't a pet. It's a loaded gun with a heartbeat. You don't look at it, you don't breathe near it, and you certainly don't try to feed it a strip of bacon." "It's just a dog, Molly," Sophie replied, tying her apron strings with military precision. "No," Molly hissed, her eyes darting toward the heavy oak doors of the lounge. "That is Logan Hayes's shadow, and shadows don't just bite, they swallow you whole." The distinct click of the lock turning on the front entrance of the Obsidian was the only warning the staff received. It wasn't opening time, but time was a relative concept for men who owned half the city. The restaurant, usually a cacophony of clinking silverware and jazz, fell into a suffocating silence. Sophie Adams smoothed the front of her black uniform. She was new here, 3 days on the floor, but she knew the type of clientele the Obsidian attracted. This was high-end misery wrapped in velvet and gold leaf. The lights were always kept low, amber pendants hanging like frozen honey drops over the booths, casting long, sharp shadows against the mahogany walls. The door swung open. First came Trevor Collins, a man whose suit looked like it cost more than Sophie's childhood home. He scanned the room, his eyes moving like security cameras, cold and mechanical. He stepped aside, holding the door. Then came the heavy breathing. It was a low, guttural sound, like an engine idling underwater. A massive grey Pitbull, built like a tank made of muscle and scarred tissue, stalked into the room. A thick leather collar, studded with silver spikes, disappeared into the folds of its massive neck. It didn't pull on the leash was slack, merely a suggestion held in the hand of the man walking behind it. Logan Hayes. Sophie had seen his face in newspapers, usually accompanied by headlines involving dropped charges or insufficient evidence. In person, he was terrifyingly sterile. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him with architectural precision. His hair was slicked back, revealing a face that seemed carved from cold marble. He didn't look at the staff. He walked straight toward the corner booth, table 9, the power seat, knowing the path would clear. And it did. Molly Parker, who was holding a tray of polished silverware, practically threw herself against the bar counter to get out of the way. The dog, Titan, paused. The animal's massive block of a head turned slowly toward Molly. A low growl vibrated through the floorboards, a sound so deep it could be felt in the teeth. "He smells fear," Trevor stated flatly, not breaking stride. "Don't smell like fear." "Easy for you to say," Molly squeaked, pressing a napkin to her mouth. Logan sat, unbuttoning his jacket with a fluid motion. Titan sat beside the booth, facing outward, a sentry made of bone and malice. The dog's eyes were a pale, unnerving amber, scanning the room with an intelligence that felt almost human. Sophie watched from the service station. She noted the way Logan didn't pet the dog. He didn't acknowledge it. It wasn't affection, it was utility. They were two halves of the same weapon. "Who's taking the table?" The manager, a sweating man named Scott Lewis, hissed from the kitchen doorway. "Molly." "I can't," Molly whispered, her face pale. "I'll drop the drinks. I swear, Scott, if that thing looks at me, I'll pass out." Scott looked around, desperate. "Paige? Rachel?" The other waitresses were busy finding imaginary dust on the far side of the restaurant. "I'll take it," Sophie said. Her voice was calm, cutting through the panic in the service station. Scott looked at her like she had just volunteered for a firing squad. "You're new. You don't know the rules. Do not look Mr. Hayes in the eye unless spoken to. Do not reach over the table. And for the love of God, stay away from the dog." "I know how to handle a table, Scott," Sophie said, grabbing the water pitcher. She walked across the floor. Her steps were measured. She didn't rush, but she didn't drag. She focused on her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The air in the restaurant smelled of expensive leather polish and the faint metallic tang of the espresso machine. As she approached table 9, the low growl started again. Titan shifted, his muscles bunching under the short grey fur. He lowered his head, a prelude to a lunge. Trevor reached for the inside of his jacket, his eyes snapping to Sophie. Logan didn't look up from the menu. "Titan," he said softly. It wasn't a command. It was an observation. The dog didn't stop growling. The rumble grew louder as Sophie stepped into the circle of amber light surrounding the table. Most people froze when 100 pounds of predator threatened them. Sophie didn't break her stride. She didn't flinch. She stepped right up to the edge of the table, within striking distance of the jaws that could snap a femur like a twig. "Sparkling or still?" she asked. The silence that followed was absolute. Logan slowly lowered the menu. For the first time, he looked at her. His eyes were dark, almost black, and devoid of anything resembling warmth. He looked at her not as a woman, but as a variable in an equation that didn't add up. "Excuse me?" Logan asked, his voice a smooth baritone. "The water, sir," Sophie said, her face blank, professional. "Sparkling or still?" Titan let out a sharp bark, a sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. He lunged forward, the chain snapping taut in Logan's hand. Sophie didn't jump. She didn't gasp. She didn't even spill a drop of water from the pitcher. She simply shifted her weight to her back foot, turning her hip slightly away from the threat. A defensive posture, but subtle. Logan tightened his grip on the leash, his knuckles turning white. He was staring at her hands. They were steady. "Still," Logan said, never taking his eyes off her. "Ice. 3 cubes exactly." "Of course." She poured the water. The stream of liquid was the only sound in the room. Titan watched her, his ears pinned back, confused by the lack of prey response. He sniffed the air, trying to find the chemical scent of adrenaline. "You're new," Trevor said, eyeing her suspicion. "What's your name?" "Sophie," she said, placing the glass on a coaster. "I'll give you a moment with the menus." She walked away, her back straight. She could feel Logan's eyes boring into her spine. She could feel the dog's confusion. Back at the station, Molly grabbed her arm. "Are you insane? He lunged at you." "He was testing boundaries," Sophie muttered, putting the pitcher down. "He's bored and dominant. Bad combination." "He's a killer," Molly corrected. "No," Sophie said, looking back at the table where Logan was watching her reflection in the dark window. "He's a tool, and tools can be broken." The evening wore on, the tension in the room ratcheting up with every minute Logan Hayes remained seated. He ordered a rare steak. Trevor ordered whiskey. They spoke in hushed tones about shipments and territories, words that drifted through the stagnant air of the restaurant like smoke. Titan remained under the table, though his presence was a constant weight. Every time a busboy passed, a low rumble emanated from the darkness beneath the velvet tablecloth. The incident happened at 9 p.m. A group of rowdy patrons, emboldened by too much wine, were leaving. One of them, a man named Derek Brooks, a known associate of a rival syndicate, though Sophie didn't know that at the time, stumbled near table 9. It might have been an accident. It might have been a calculated insult. Derek's coattails brushed against Logan's shoulder. "Watch it," Trevor snapped, half rising from his seat. Derek laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Put a leash on your dogs, Hayes. Both of them." The air in the room vanished. Under the table, the chain snapped. It wasn't that the leather broke. It was that Titan moved with such explosive force that the chair leg the leash was looped around splintered. The dog launched itself from beneath the table, a grey blur of teeth and fury. Derek Brooks screamed and fell backward, scrambling away. Titan didn't go for the throat immediately. He corralled him, snapping inches from his face, barking with a ferocity that shook the glassware on the shelves. Trevor had his gun out. Logan was on his feet, shouting, "Titan, heel, now!" The dog ignored him. This was bloodlust. The predator brain had taken over. Titan lunged again, teeth catching the sleeve of Derek's coat, ripping the expensive fabric. Derek kicked out, connecting with the dog's ribs, which only enraged the animal further. "Shoot it!" Derek screamed, crawling toward the bar. "Shoot the damn thing!" The restaurant was in chaos. Molly was screaming. Scott was hiding behind the register. Trevor aimed his weapon at the dog, hesitating. He couldn't shoot the boss's prize, but he couldn't let a massacre happen in the middle of dinner service. "Titan!" Logan roared, stepping forward, grabbing for the trailing leash. The dog snapped back at him, a warning bite that missed Logan's hand by a millimeter. Logan froze. The dog had turned on him. The control was gone. Sophie was moving before she made the conscious decision to do so. She vaulted over the service counter. She didn't run. Running triggered the chase instinct. She walked with terrifying speed and purpose, cutting a straight line through the chaos. "Get back!" Trevor yelled at her, waving the gun. "He'll kill you!" Sophie ignored the gun. She ignored Derek screaming on the floor. She focused entirely on the grey mass of muscle, vibrating with rage. She stepped directly between Derek and the dog. The room gasped. She was offering herself up, a human shield. Titan looked up, startled by the sudden barrier. His lips curled back, revealing rows of serrated white teeth. He snarled, a sound of pure violence, and crouched to spring at her throat. Sophie didn't flinch. She didn't shout. She didn't raise her hands in surrender or aggression. She dropped to her knees. It was the most submissive posture possible, yet she did it with the energy of a king. She lowered her center of gravity, bringing her face level with the snarling beast. Logan watched, paralyzed by the sheer insanity of it. "Girl, get up," he warned, his voice low. Sophie locked eyes with Titan. She didn't stare him down. That was a challenge. She softened her gaze, blinking slowly. Then, she did the shocking thing. She extended her hand, palm up, fingers relaxed, and she made a sound. It wasn't a word, it wasn't a command in English, German, or the standard K9 Dutch. It was a sharp, double click of her tongue against the roof of her mouth, followed by a low, melodic hum from the back of her throat. Click, click. The effect was instantaneous. It was like someone had flipped a switch inside the animal. Titan stopped mid-snarl. His ears, previously pinned flat against his skull, pricked up. The hackles on his back began to lower. He tilted his head, the amber eyes widening, dilating. The chaotic noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. All that existed was the woman and the beast. Sophie repeated the sound, softer this time. She moved her hand forward, millimeter by millimeter. Titan whined. It was a puppy sound, incongruous, coming from such a monster. He inched forward, sniffing the air around her hand. He smelled the soap from the kitchen, the starch of her uniform, and underneath it all, a scent that he recognized. Something alpha. Something calm. Sophie moved her hand further, bypassing the nose, and placed her palm flat against the dog's chest, right over the thundering heart. "Easy, soldier," she whispered. "Mission over. Stand down." Titan let out a long, shuddering breath. His massive body slumped. He didn't just sit. He collapsed onto the floor, resting his heavy chin on Sophie's knee. She began to scratch the thick skin behind his ears, her movements rhythmic and confident. The monster closed his eyes. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Derek Brooks was still on the floor, hyperventilating. Trevor lowered his gun, his mouth slightly open. But it was Logan Hayes who looked the most shaken. He stared at the waitress kneeling on the floor of his restaurant, his uncontrollable beast acting like a lapdog in her presence. He had spent $50,000 training that dog. He had hired the best handlers in Europe. None of them had ever stopped Titan once the red mist descended. Sophie looked up, her hand still resting on the dog's head. She looked straight at Logan. "Your dog has a luxating patella on the rear left leg," she said calmly, as if discussing the wine list. "That's why he's irritable. The hard floors hurt him. And that collar is pinching a nerve cluster in his neck. He's not mean, Mr. Hayes. He's in pain." Logan blinked. "Who are you?" Sophie stood up, gently nudging Titan aside. The dog looked at her with adoration, thumping his tail once on the floor. "I'm your waitress," Sophie said, dusting off her knees. "And your steak is getting cold." The aftermath of the incident was a flurry of activity that felt more like a crime scene cleanup than a restaurant closing. Derek Brooks had been escorted out, violently, by Trevor. The other patrons had been comped their meals and ushered out the back door with vague threats about keeping their mouths shut. By 10 p.m., the Obsidian was empty, save for the kitchen staff, Sophie, and the 2 men at table 9. Titan was currently sleeping under the table, his head resting on Sophie's foot every time she came by to refill the water. "Bring her here," Logan said. He hadn't touched his steak. He had spent the last hour watching Sophie work, analyzing her movements. Trevor nodded and walked to the service station. "Boss wants a word." Molly grabbed Sophie's wrist. "Don't go. Run out the back. I'll call the police." "The police work for him, Molly," Sophie said gently, removing Molly's hand. "It's fine. Go home." Sophie walked to the table. The atmosphere was heavier now. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a cold, sharp tension. "Sit," Logan commanded, gesturing to the empty leather bench opposite him. "I'm on the clock, sir. Staff aren't allowed to sit with—" "Sit down," Logan repeated. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking a desk. Sophie sat. She sat upright, hands folded in her lap. She didn't lean back. Logan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. The dim light caught the sharp angles of his cheekbones. "I don't like mysteries, Sophie. Mysteries are liabilities. I'm not a mystery. I'm an employee. You're a waitress who diagnosed an orthopedic condition in a fighting dog and subdued a lethal animal with a hum. That isn't something you learn at community college." Logan's eyes narrowed. "Where did you learn that hand signal? The palm up. The sound." Sophie hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. A flicker of old pain crossed her eyes. "I grew up on a farm. We had dogs." "Liar," Trevor said, standing behind Logan. "That was a tactical de-escalation. I've seen K9 units use variants of it, but nothing that effective." Logan silenced Trevor with a raised hand. He kept his gaze fixed on Sophie. "Derek Brooks is going to be a problem. He'll tell the other families that I can't control my own animal. That makes me look weak. Weakness invites war." "He won't tell them you can't control the dog," Sophie said. "He'll tell them you have a staff that is loyal enough to die for you. That makes you look powerful." Logan paused. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark finding blood in the water. "Smart. Very smart." He reached into his jacket pocket. Sophie tensed, her muscles coiling, ready to move. If he pulled a gun, she would flip the table, kick Titan to wake him, and go for the throat. Logan pulled out a silver cigar cutter. He set it on the table with a click. Sophie forced her muscles to relax. Paranoia, she told herself. Stop acting like a soldier. You're right about the leg, Logan said. He limps when it rains. I thought it was just age. He needs glucosamine and a softer bed, and lose the spiked collar. It's theatrical and cruel. You have a lot of opinions for someone who makes minimum wage. I have a lot of experience with things that are misunderstood, Sophie replied. Logan studied her. He looked at her hands, rough, calloused, fingernails cut short. He looked at the faint white scar running along her jawline, barely visible under the restaurant lighting. Trevor, Logan said, sitting back. Fire her. Sophie's heart sank. She needed this job. It was off the books. It was cash. It was safe. Sir, Fire her from the wait staff, Logan clarified. He looked at Sophie. You're done serving drinks. As of tonight, you're on my personal payroll. Doing what? Sophie asked, wary. Titan likes you. He hates everyone, even Trevor. Logan glanced down at the sleeping dog. You're going to fix him. You're going to train him. And you're going to make sure he never snaps at me again. I'm not a dog trainer, Mr. Hayes. No, Logan said, standing up. He buttoned his jacket. You're something else entirely. I just haven't figured out what yet. He tossed a heavy gold coin onto the table, a tip, or perhaps a down payment. Be at my estate at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Trevor will drive you. Don't be late. Logan turned and walked away. Titan woke up instantly, scrambling to his feet, letting out a sharp yip of pain as his bad leg took the weight. He looked at Sophie, whined once, and then dutifully limped after his master. Sophie sat alone in the booth. She looked at the gold coin. It wasn't currency. It was a marker, a challenge. She picked it up. Her hand wasn't trembling, but her mind was racing. She had come to this city to disappear. She had changed her name, dyed her hair, and buried her past in a shallow grave. She wanted to be invisible, but she had just tamed the monster of the most dangerous man in the city. And now she was going straight into the lion's den. Trevor lingered by the door. 8 a.m., Sophie, and bring your farm stories. I want to hear the one about how you learned to disarm a kill switch. He walked out, leaving Sophie in the silence of the empty restaurant. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, battered silver locket. She opened it. Inside wasn't a picture of a family or a lover. It was a small, folded piece of paper with a sequence of numbers and a military insignia. Just a waitress, she whispered to the empty room. Just keep telling them that. She stood up, untied her apron, and left it on the table next to the gold coin. The game had changed. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was infiltrating. And Logan Hayes had no idea what he had just invited into his home. The Hayes estate was less a home and more a monument to paranoia. Situated on a cliff overlooking the grey, churning ocean, it was a sprawling structure of concrete, glass, and steel. There were no flower beds, no welcoming mats, just 12-foot walls topped with cameras that tracked movement with the silent efficiency of predators. Sophie stepped out of Trevor's black SUV at exactly 8 a.m. She wore jeans and a thick grey sweater, practical clothes for dog training. She carried a canvas duffel bag containing her few possessions, a clicker, a bag of high-grade liver treats she'd bought at a 24-hour market, and the encrypted satellite phone she kept hidden in a pair of rolled-up socks. "Welcome to the fun house," Trevor muttered, punching a code into the keypad at the main gate. "Don't wander off. The perimeter sensors are set to stun if you're lucky, and maim if you're not." "Does he live here alone?" Sophie asked, scanning the windows. She counted 4 visible security guards, but she knew there were at least 6 more hidden in the landscape. The sightlines were perfect for defense. "Just him and the staff, and the dog," Trevor replied. "The dog lives in the bunker." "The bunker?" Trevor pointed to a detached concrete structure near the garage. It looked like a bomb shelter. "Mr. Hayes doesn't like hair on the furniture. Titan stays there." Sophie felt a flash of anger. He keeps a dog with arthritis on a concrete floor in a bunker. No wonder the animal wants to kill everyone. She didn't wait for Trevor to escort her. She marched toward the bunker. "Hey, you can't just—" Trevor started, but Sophie was already punching the opening button on the heavy steel door. The door hissed open. The smell hit her first, bleach and isolation. Inside, it was a sterile cell. A metal cot with a thin blanket was the only comfort. Titan was pacing in the corner, his nails clicking rhythmically on the cold floor. When the door opened, he snarled, backing into the shadows. "Hey, buddy," Sophie whispered, dropping to a crouch. She ignored the growl. "It's just me. Jailbreak time." Titan's ears perked up. He recognized the voice. He recognized the scent. He moved out of the shadows, his tail giving a tentative wag. "What are you doing?" Logan's voice boomed from the doorway. Sophie spun around. Logan was standing there in a navy tracksuit, looking like he'd just finished a 10-mile run. He wasn't even winded. Sweat glistened on his neck, but his expression was as icy as ever. "I'm moving him," Sophie said, clipping a soft lead onto Titan's collar. She had removed the spiked leather one the night before, a small act of rebellion he hadn't stopped. "Moving him where?" "Inside, to the house." Logan crossed his arms. The muscles in his forearms shifted. "No. Animals stay outside. That is the rule." "Then you can find a new trainer," Sophie said, standing up. Titan pressed his side against her leg, seeking contact. "This environment is psychologically damaging. He's aggressive because he's isolated and in pain. If you want a guard dog, buy a robot. If you want a loyal protector, he needs to be part of the pack, and you are the pack leader, or you're supposed to be." Logan stared at her. He was used to people trembling. He was used to, "Yes, sir," and "Right away, sir." He wasn't used to a woman in a thrift store sweater telling him how to run his household. "He sheds," Logan said, a weak defense. "I'll vacuum," Sophie countered. "And he needs a memory foam bed. I saw a guest room on the first floor plans. I mean, looking at the house from the outside, I assume there's a guest room." Logan's eyes narrowed slightly at her slip. "First floor, east wing. If you choose one piece of antique furniture, I take the cost out of your pay." "Deal." Sophie led Titan past Logan. As they passed, the dog stiffened, but Sophie clicked her tongue. Click, click, and Titan relaxed, trotting obediently by her side. Logan watched them go, a strange sensation tightening his chest. He wasn't sure if he was annoyed by her insubordination or impressed by her audacity. "Trevor," Logan said without turning around. "Yeah, boss?" "Run her prints again. Run her face through the Interpol database. Run everything. A farm girl from Nebraska doesn't know how to analyze the tactical layout of a building from the driveway." "On it," Trevor said. "You think she's a Fed?" "No," Logan said, watching Sophie guide the massive dog up the front steps of his fortress. "Feds are arrogant. She's precise. She's something else." 2 weeks passed. The transformation in the house was subtle, but undeniable. The sterile silence of the estate was now punctuated by the sound of dog tags jingling and Sophie's soft commands. Sophie had Titan on a strict regimen. Mornings were for physical therapy, swimming in the heated indoor pool, which Logan had initially forbidden, then silently allowed when he saw Titan swimming laps like a seal. Afternoons were for obedience, But the real work happened in the evenings. Sophie had realized quickly that Titan wasn't just aggressive, he was traumatized. He was terrified of loud noises. A car backfiring sent him into a shaking panic or a blind rage. For a mafia boss's dog, this was a fatal flaw. It was a Tuesday evening. Logan was in his study, reviewing ledgers. The glass walls offered a view of the sprawling lawn where Sophie was working with Titan. She was training him with a starter pistol. Logan watched, fascinated. Most trainers would fire the gun and punish the dog if it flinched. Sophie did the opposite. She would show Titan the gun, then give him a piece of steak. She would click the trigger without firing, then steak. Bang! Titan flinched, a low growl starting in his throat. Sophie didn't scold him. She immediately engaged him in play, tossing a tug toy, making happy, high-pitched sounds. She was rewiring his brain, associating the bang with joy rather than pain. Logan stood up and walked out to the patio. He held a glass of bourbon in his hand. "You're spoiling him," Logan said. Sophie looked up, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I'm desensitizing him. He associates gunfire with pain. Likely his previous owner used it as a discipline tool." "His previous owner is dead," Logan said flatly. "I saw to that." "Good," Sophie said, and the darkness in her tone surprised him. It wasn't the voice of a civilian. It was the voice of someone who understood that some people needed to be removed from the equation. Titan trotted over to Logan. Instead of cowering, the dog sat and offered a paw. Logan stared at the paw. He looked at Sophie. "What am I supposed to do?" "Shake it. He's asking for a truce." Logan hesitated. He shifted his glass to his left hand and reached out. He took the massive paw. Titan's tail gave a slow, rhythmic thump against the grass. For the first time in years, Logan felt something unclench in his gut. "He trusts you now," Sophie said softly. "Don't break it." "I don't trust easily, Sophie." "Neither does he. That's why you two are a perfect match." Logan stepped closer to her. The air between them suddenly felt charged, heavy with the scent of cut grass and impending storms. He was close enough to see the flecks of green in her hazel eyes, close enough to smell the vanilla shampoo she used. "And what about you?" Logan asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Do you trust easily?" Sophie held his gaze. "In my line of work, trust gets you killed." "And what line of work is that? Waitressing?" Sophie didn't blink. "Serving people what they deserve." The moment was shattered by a piercing sound, not a gunshot, but the high-pitched whine of an incoming projectile. Sophie's reaction was instantaneous. She didn't look for the source. She didn't scream. She tackled Logan. It was a tackle of perfect geometric efficiency. She hit him center mass, driving him backward off the patio and onto the grass behind a stone planter. Crack! A bullet pulverized the glass door where Logan had been standing a millisecond before. "Stay down!" Sophie hissed. She wasn't the waitress anymore. Her voice was pure command. She rolled off him, keeping low, and grabbed Titan by the collar, pulling the confused dog down behind cover. "Sniper!" she yelled toward the house, her voice cutting through the air. "Northridge, 800 meters." Security guards were scrambling out of the house, weapons drawn. Trevor was shouting orders. Logan lay on the grass, stunned. His shoulder throbbed where she had hit him. He looked at Sophie. She wasn't panicking. She was scanning the ridge line, her eyes narrowed, calculating windage and elevation without even holding a weapon. "How did you know?" Logan breathed. "I heard the snap," Sophie said, not looking at him. "Supersonic round. You hear the bullet break the sound barrier before you hear the gun." She looked at him then, and she realized her mistake. She had reacted with training, not instinct. Civilians didn't know the difference between a supersonic crack and a car backfire. Civilians didn't estimate range in meters. Logan was looking at her with a mixture of gratitude and profound suspicion. "Who are you?" he demanded, gripping her wrist. "The person who just saved your life," Sophie said, pulling her arm free. "Now move! He's adjusting for wind!" She dragged him toward the side door, just as a second bullet chipped the stone planter, sending shrapnel flying into the night. The estate was on lockdown. The shutters were down, the perimeter lights were blazing, and a team of 12 men was sweeping the North Ridge. Inside the library, the mood was funereal. Logan sat in a leather armchair, a medic bandaging a cut on his cheek from the stone shrapnel. Trevor was pacing, talking furiously into a phone. Sophie sat on the sofa, Titan's head in her lap. She was calm. Too calm. Logan waved the medic away. "Leave us." The medic hurried out. Trevor hung up the phone and stood by the door, his hand resting on his holster. "The shooter is gone," Trevor said. "We found a shell casing, military grade, long range." "Derek Brooks doesn't have access to that kind of talent," Logan said, his eyes never leaving Sophie. "That was a professional hit." He stood up and walked over to Sophie. He towered over her, radiating menace. The sexual tension from the garden was gone, replaced by the cold fury of a man who realized he had a spy in his house. "Stand up," Logan said. Sophie stood, gently moving Titan aside. The dog whined but stayed. "Northridge, 800 meters. Supersonic crack," Logan recited. "You called it before the glass broke. You tackled me with perfect form, and you knew exactly where to drag me for cover." "I watch a lot of movies," Sophie said, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "Bullshit!" Logan snarled. He grabbed her handbag from the table and dumped it out. The clicker, the treats, a lipstick, and the satellite phone tumbled onto the Persian rug. Logan picked up the phone. It wasn't an iPhone. It was a black, ruggedized brick with no branding. "Movies, huh?" Logan held up the device. "Is this a prop?" Sophie stayed silent. There was no lie that would cover this. "Unlock it," Logan ordered. "I can't." "Unlock it, or I give you to Trevor. And Trevor isn't as fond of you as the dog is." Sophie looked at Trevor. The man looked torn, but his loyalty to Logan was absolute. He stepped forward. "Logan, don't," Sophie said, her voice dropping the waitress affectation entirely. It was deeper now, authoritative. "If you unlock that phone, you trigger a distress beacon. Within 10 minutes, a strike team will be rappelling down your chimney." Logan froze. He looked at the phone, then at her. "You're a cop?" "No." "Fed?" "No." "Then what?" Sophie took a step forward. "I'm the only reason you're not dead. That sniper wasn't sent by a rival family, Logan. It was sent by the Blackwood Syndicate." Logan went pale. The Blackwood Syndicate was a myth, a shadow organization of mercenaries and rogue intelligence agents that swallowed criminal empires whole. They didn't have rivals. They had acquisitions. "Blackwood doesn't exist," Logan said, though his voice lacked conviction. "They exist," Sophie said, "and they've been dismantling your operation from the inside for 6 months. Derek Brooks is their pawn. He was supposed to provoke you at the restaurant, get you to kill him or cause a scene that would land you in prison. When I stopped Titan, I ruined their timeline." She pointed to the window. "So they moved to Plan B, assassination." Logan stared at her, his mind reeling. The pieces fit, the missing shipments, the silent partners backing out, the sudden boldness of idiots like Brooks. "And you?" Logan asked. "Who do you work for?" "I'm a freelancer," Sophie lied smoothly. In reality, she was AWOL from a government black ops unit that officially didn't exist, hiding from her own demons. but he didn't need to know that. "I hunt Blackwood. I've been tracking that sniper for 3 weeks. I knew he was targeting a high-level asset in the city. I just didn't know it was you until I saw the laser painting your chest." It was a half-truth, but it was convincing. Logan looked at the phone again. He tossed it back to her. She caught it with one hand. "You're not a waitress," Logan said, a mix of anger and awe in his voice. "I make a terrible waitress," Sophie admitted. "I mixed up the orders on table 4 twice last week." "Why save me?" Logan asked. "If you hunt Blackwood, why not let them take me out and then go after the shooter?" Sophie looked down at Titan. The dog had sensed the tension and had crawled over to sit on her feet, leaning his weight against her legs. "Because," Sophie said, looking up at Logan, her gaze softening, "you're the only one who can control the city. If you fall, there's a power vacuum, and innocents get caught in the crossfire, and—" She hesitated. "Because your dog likes me. And I have a rule about not letting dogs become orphans." Logan stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "You're staying," Logan said finally. "But not as a dog trainer." "I'm not joining your crew, Logan." "No," Logan said, walking back to his desk and pulling a Sig Sauer P226 from a drawer. He checked the chamber and set it on the desk. "You're going to be my bodyguard, because if Blackwood is coming, I don't need soldiers. I need a ghost." "I'm expensive," Sophie said, crossing her arms. "I can afford you. And I keep the dog in the house." Logan looked at Titan, then at Sophie. A smirk, genuine and dangerous, touched his lips. "The dog stays in the house," Logan agreed. "But if we survive this, Sophie, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about who exactly you are running from." Sophie picked up the gun from the desk, checked the weight, and slid it into the waistband of her jeans. "Deal, but first, we need to move. That sniper missed. He'll call in a breach team." As if on cue, the lights in the estate flickered and died. The backup generators groaned to life, bathing the room in emergency red light. "They're here," Sophie whispered. Titan growled, low and deep, facing the hallway door. The beast was awake, and this time, the wolf was inside the fold. The emergency red lighting turned the estate into a labyrinth of blood-colored shadows. The hum of the backup generator was a low thrum that vibrated in the teeth, masking the sound of footsteps. "Corridor C is compromised," Sophie whispered, pressing her back against the cold marble of the hallway wall. She held the Sig Sauer close to her chest, her breathing shallow and controlled. Logan stood opposite her, a fire axe he had pulled from an emergency case gripped in his hands. He looked out of place in his own home, a king whose castle had been turned into a kill box. But there was no fear in his eyes, only a lethal, calculating rage. Titan stood between them. The dog was silent. His ears were swiveling like radar dishes, tracking sounds that human ears couldn't detect. He wasn't growling. Growling gave away position. He was simply waiting, his muscles coiled under his grey coat. "How many?" Logan mouthed. Sophie held up 3 fingers. "Breach team, heavy armor, night vision." She pointed to the antique vase at the end of the hall. "Titan," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Guard." The dog understood. He didn't run. He slunk forward, his grey body blending into the shadows, and crouched behind the pedestal of the vase. "We need to get to the server room," Logan whispered. "I can override the lockdown from there and trap them in the east wing." "We'll never make it," Sophie countered. "They're funneling us toward the master bedroom. It's a classic kill zone tactic. They want us cornered." A crash echoed from the floor below, the sound of the front doors being rammed. "Change of plan," Sophie said, her eyes snapping to Logan. "We don't run, we hunt." She didn't wait for his approval. She moved. She didn't walk. She flowed, moving from cover to cover with a grace that terrified Logan as much as it impressed him. This wasn't a waitress. This was a weapon of war that had been hiding in an apron. They reached the intersection of the main hallway. 3 beams of tactical lasers swept through the dust-filled air. "Now!" Sophie yelled. She swung around the corner, firing 2 shots. Pop-up! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The lid mercenary took 2 rounds to the chest plate. He stumbled back, but didn't fall. Armor. "Titan! Fass!" Sophie shouted. The German command for bite that she hadn't taught him in front of Logan. The dog launched himself from the shadows like a grey missile. He didn't go for the arm or the leg. He went for the gap between the helmet and the shoulder plating. The mercenary screamed as 100 pounds of muscle slammed into him. Titan's jaws locked, and he thrashed his head, dragging the man to the ground. The other 2 mercenaries turned their weapons toward the dog. Sophie stepped into the open, firing with surgical precision, 1 bullet through a visor. The man dropped. The 3rd mercenary swung his rifle toward Sophie. Logan moved. He didn't have a gun, and he didn't have training, but he had the brute force of a man defending his territory. He swung the fire axe with a primal roar. The blade caught the barrel of the rifle, deflecting the spray of bullets into the ceiling. Logan drove his shoulder into the man, slamming him against the wall. The mercenary fumbled for a knife, but Logan was faster, fueled by adrenaline. He delivered a crushing blow with the handle of the axe, sending the intruder slumping to the floor. Silence returned to the hallway, broken only by the heavy breathing of the men and the wet sound of Titan resetting his grip on the unconscious leader. "Good boy," Sophie whispered, her hands shaking slightly as the adrenaline dump hit. "Leave it." Titan released the man instantly and trotted back to Sophie, his muzzle stained crimson. He sat and looked up at her, waiting for the treat he knew wasn't coming. Logan stared at the carnage. 3 highly trained operatives neutralized in under 30 seconds. He looked at Sophie. She was checking the pulse of the man Titan had taken down. "He's alive," Sophie said. "Unconscious, but alive." "Good," Logan said, wiping a splatter of blood from his cheek. "Because he's going to tell us who opened the gate." "They hacked the gate, Logan." "No," Logan said, walking over to the keypad on the wall. The light was green. The system wasn't hacked. It was disengaged from the inside. Someone with biometric clearance let them in. Sophie stood up. The realization hit them both at the same time. The enemy wasn't just at the gates. The enemy was in the room. They dragged the unconscious mercenary into the library and zip-tied him to a radiator. Logan secured the door while Sophie reloaded her weapon, taking a magazine from the fallen soldier's vest. "Who has clearance?" Sophie asked. "Besides you and Trevor." "Corey Adams," Logan said, the name tasting like bile. "Head of Perimeter Security, and Scott Lewis, my operations manager." "Scott is a coward," Sophie said, recalling the sweating manager at the restaurant. "He wouldn't have the nerve to open the gates for a hit squad. He'd sell you out for money, sure, but he wouldn't be part of the wet work." "That leaves Corey," Logan said. He walked to the desk and pulled up the internal security feed on his laptop. Most of the cameras were dead, static filling the screen. But one camera, the one in the garage, was still live. On the screen, in the grain of the night vision feed, they saw a figure standing by the fuse box. He was talking on a radio. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing the uniform of the house staff. It wasn't Corey Adams, it was Trevor. Logan froze. He stared at the screen, unable to process the image. Trevor, who had been by his side for 10 years. Trevor, who had taken a bullet for him in Chicago. "No," Logan whispered. "That's impossible." "He's cutting the hard line for the backup alarm," Sophie said, her voice devoid of emotion. She was analyzing the threat, not the betrayal. He's making sure no signal gets out. Why? Logan slammed his fist onto the desk, cracking the wood. I gave him everything. He's my brother. Everyone has a price, Logan, or a pressure point. Blackwood is good at finding them. They probably have his family, or a debt he couldn't pay. I don't care, Logan said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. He opened the door. Titan growled at the door. Footsteps were approaching, heavy, confident footsteps. He's coming to check the bodies, Sophie said. He thinks the breach team finished us. She looked at Logan. You can't hesitate. If he comes through that door, he is a hostile. Do you understand? Logan looked at the gun in Sophie's hand. Then he looked at Titan. The dog was ready to kill again. The only thing stopping him was Sophie's command. I won't hesitate, Logan said. The door handle turned. It was locked. Boss? Trevor's voice came through the oak. You in there? The team is down. I checked the perimeter. It's clear. It was a lie. A smooth, practiced lie. Logan looked at Sophie. She nodded. I'm here, Trevor, Logan called out, his voice steady. Open it. I'm hurt. A pause. Then the sound of a key in the lock. The door swung open. Trevor stepped in, his gun drawn but lowered. He scanned the room. He saw Logan leaning against the desk, clutching his arm. He saw Sophie standing by the window, her hands empty. He didn't see Titan. The dog was under the desk, a silent shadow. Thank God, Trevor said, holstering his weapon. I thought they got you. I saw the bodies in the hall. Hell of a mess. Who were they, Trevor? Logan asked, not moving. Mercs, freelance, probably hired by the triads. Trevor walked closer. We need to get you out of here. The car is prepped. The car, Logan repeated. To take me where? A safe house or a ditch? Trevor stopped. The air in the room shifted. What are you talking about? I saw the feed, Trevor. I saw you at the fuse box. Trevor's face didn't change, but his eyes went dead. The mask fell away. You were supposed to be dead in the hall, Logan. It would have been cleaner. Why? Because Blackwood offered me a way out, a life where I don't have to look over my shoulder every time a car backfires. They offered me peace, Logan, and $10 million. You sold me for retirement money, Logan said, shaking his head. It's just business, boss. You taught me that. Trevor's hand drifted back toward his holster. I can't let you leave this room. Neither can I, Sophie said. Trevor spun toward her, drawing his weapon. Titan! Sophie screamed. The dog exploded from beneath the desk. He didn't bite this time. He rammed Trevor, hitting him in the knees with the force of a bowling ball. Trevor's legs buckled, and he went down hard, the gun skittering across the floor. Trevor scrambled for the weapon, but Sophie was there. She kicked him in the ribs, flipping him onto his back, and leveled the Sig Sauer at his forehead. Don't move, she ordered. Trevor wheezed, looking up at her. Then he looked at Logan. Do it, Logan. Be the monster everyone thinks you are. Logan walked over. He picked up Trevor's gun. He looked down at the man who had been his shadow. I'm not a monster, Logan said quietly. I'm a businessman. He turned to Sophie. Tie him up. He's going to tell us everything about Blackwood before the cops get here. The cops? Trevor laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. You called the cops? No, Logan said, looking at the flashing blue lights reflecting off the ceiling. My neighbor did. Apparently, gunfire ruins the property value. The sun rose over the ocean, casting a stark grey light over the battered estate. Police cars and ambulances filled the driveway. The breach team was in custody, or body bags. Trevor was being loaded into a federal transport vehicle. It turned out Sophie's freelance claim had enough weight to get a hold of some old contacts who were very interested in a Blackwood operative. Logan sat on the steps of the porch, a blanket draped over his shoulders. Titan was sitting next to him, his head resting on Logan's knee. The dog was exhausted, one eye swollen shut from the scuffle, but alive. Sophie walked out of the house. She had changed back into her jeans and sweater. She was carrying her duffel bag. Logan watched her approach. Going somewhere? "My cover is blown," Sophie said, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "Blackwood knows I'm here. If I stay, they'll send a battalion next time. You're safer without me." Logan stood up. The blanket fell to the ground. "Safety is a myth, Sophie. You told me that." I lied. "Did you lie about the dog?" Logan asked, gesturing to Titan. "No, he's a good boy." "Did you lie about saving my life? Twice?" Reflexes. Logan walked down the steps until he was standing toe to toe with her. He didn't care about the police, the paramedics, or the ruin of his home. He only cared about the woman who had walked into the lion's den and tamed the beasts, both the four-legged one and the two-legged one. "I don't want a bodyguard anymore," Logan said. "Good, because I quit. I want a partner." Sophie froze. She looked up at him, searching for the deception, but found only raw, exhausted honesty. "I come with baggage, Logan. Dangerous baggage." "I have a fortress," Logan said, gesturing to the house, "and a Pitbull, and I think I'm falling in love with the woman who knows how to use a starter pistol as a chew toy." Sophie laughed, a genuine, tired sound. "You're crazy. I'm a mafia boss who takes orders from a waitress. Crazy is my baseline." He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, solid. "Stay," Logan said. "Not for the job. For us." Titan barked, a sharp, demanding sound. He limped over and wedged himself between them, looking from one to the other, his tail wagging slowly. Sophie looked at the dog. She looked at the man. She looked at the duffel bag in her hand. She dropped the bag. "Okay," she whispered. "But the dog sleeps in the bedroom." Logan smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "Deal." He pulled her in, kissing her amidst the chaos of sirens and shouting. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The house was broken, the traitor was gone, and the war with Blackwood was just beginning. But as they stood there, flanked by the loyal beast, they knew one thing for certain. They were no longer fighting alone. And that is how a waitress with a mysterious past walked into the most dangerous restaurant in the city and walked out with the heart of the beast. Sophie didn't just tame the dog. She tamed the man who thought he was beyond redemption. But the Blackwood Syndicate is still out there, and Trevor's betrayal was just the first domino. If you want to see Sophie and Logan take the fight to Blackwood in a sequel, hit that like button and smash subscribe. Let's get this video to 50,000 likes, and I'll drop part 2, The Syndicate Falls, next week. Who do you think is really running Blackwood? Tell me your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching.